What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with the video. Deebo Samuel sold us last night, but I'm optimistic about our chances this weekend. First thing I think we have to go over is this Bills at Lions game. I want to say 54.5 point total is the highest of the season. If not, it's tied for the highest. The Lions have won 11 straight games, scoring at least 23 points in 10 straight and averaging 32 points per game on the season. Meanwhile, you have Buffalo absolutely destroying recently. They've won 7 of their last 8 games. They've scored at least 30 points in 7 straight. They're second behind the Lions, averaging 30.5 points per game on the season. Points are going to be scored in this one, which means yards are going to be gained as well. And if either team, this is the big thing, right? When we have these close games, you know, a team scores, another team scores, they kind of stay with each other. Sometimes we can see one side start to get a little conservative, the other side kind of follow suit, and we get like a 24-27 game at the end of it, which is still a high total game, right? That's still 51 points, but to see it really pop off, we want one of the sides jumping out to like a 2-score lead. Like if Detroit here gets up 10-0, 13-0, something like that, we could really see the Bills be aggressive, the Bills catch up, the Lions see them score twice, and okay, we got to get going. Like that's how we really start to see these games take off. The tough part here is just how many ways each of these teams can move the ball. There isn't a shortage of playmakers on either side, and that's especially true for Buffalo now that it seems like, not confirmed yet, but as of recording, kind of seems like Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid are going to be active this week. That just adds 2 more playmakers to the team. So we have to figure out, how do we want to attack this game? We know points are going to be scored. We know there's going to be yards. Who's it going to come through? On Buffalo, I think it'll be through Josh Allen and Khalil Shakir. The Lions are the second worst matchup for running backs, or the third worst matchup for tight ends. They're a pretty neutral matchup for outside wide receivers, but they're actually the second best matchup for slot wide receivers. We also know that the Bills are perfectly willing, recently especially, to let Josh Allen cook. And so if they get down at any point, we could see a game like last week where Josh Allen had 47 of the team's 54 plays that resulted in a touch for him, either a pass attempt or a carry. 47 of 54. There were only 7 plays that did not result in Josh Allen throwing the ball or running the ball. If that does happen, it's because you saw a ton of dropbacks, a ton of pass attempts, and Shakir should benefit the most. He runs 76% of his routes out of the slot. He has an insane 36% target rate out of the slot, 2.37 yards per route run out of the slot. Those are both easily the best numbers on the Bills. That 2.37 yards per route run number, that is actually a top 5 number among qualified slot wide receivers this season. So I would take higher than 55.5 receiving yards for Khalil Shakir. And I would also take higher than 254.5 passing yards for Josh Allen. Like I said, I think the Bills are going to let Josh Allen cook once again. That's historically just what they've done in these big games, but you also have no weather concerns, and you've got an offense on the other side that you just know are going to score points. I don't even care what the opposing defense is. The Lions are going to score points, and the Bills know that. So they're going to put the ball in Josh Allen's hands and hope that he can pull off something like he did last week. It's just incredibly unlikely as well that even if they went into the game like, no, we're going to establish the ground. Again, probably not going to happen. But if they wanted to establish the run, they can't. Like, they're just not going to. And so I'd imagine even if that were the game plan, they're going to have to abandon that pretty quickly. Over the first 6 weeks of the season, Josh Allen went higher than this total only one time, because he was averaging only 26 pass attempts per game, had a high of 30. In the 7 games since then, Josh Allen only has 1 game below 33 pass attempts, averaging 34 per game, and going higher than this total 5 of 7 weeks. With his weapons back healthy and the importance of this game, I think he's got a really good opportunity to go higher than 254.5 passing yards. So we're taking Allen, taking Shakir on the Bills side. What about the Lions side? Best way to move the ball against the Bills is on the ground or with slot wide receivers as well. They are a top 10 matchup for running back rushing. They're a top 5 matchup for slot wide receivers. So honestly, you can really attack the Lions side however you want. If you really like one of the running backs, go with them on the ground, not as much in receptions. If you really like any of these pass catchers, you can go with them. I think those weeks at like the beginning to middle part of the season have people scared off of Jared Goff. Remember, he had that stretch where he was completing like 100% of passes, and so they weren't throwing for that many pass attempts because they were so efficient on offense. He had a stretch where his pass attempt totals were 23, 18, 25, 25, 15, and 22. Again, he was hyperly efficient on those pass attempts, and so it still made it possible to stack him up, because if he's completing all of those for huge gains, we're still having really good games, right? In the 5 games since then, he's bottomed out at 29 pass attempts, and that was even in a 52-6 blowout. I do think Josh Allen is going to allow the Bills to keep pace this week. I do not think it's going to be a 52-6 blowout. And so I think, these last 5 games for Jared Goff, he's been averaging 34 pass attempts per game. I think we're going to see him finish much closer to that total than where he was at the beginning of the season, where he was averaging 26 pass attempts per game. I also like taking Goff just because passing simply is more efficient, and it bleeds the clock less because you get incomplete passes, which stop the clock, obviously. So you're gaining more yards on average, and when you're not gaining yards, the clock is stopping. That's great for total plays on the other side, because if we take higher on these rushing totals with running backs, it's a great matchup, so they definitely can get there. But if they do and they crush on the ground, it likely means that Detroit is sustaining longer drives and they're just keeping the ball for longer, and that just limits the opportunities for Buffalo. And we still need the Buffalo side to hit as well. So personally, I would prefer using a pass catcher. That way, just if they hit for a big play, if they are seeing higher pass attempt totals, it just correlates a lot better with getting Buffalo back onto the field with more time remaining. I also prefer, and this is where I think you can go either way, because St. Brown doesn't have a crazy projection this weekend. So if you wanted to go with St. Brown, totally fine doing that. Again, the matchup does favor him over Jameson Williams. I do like going with Jameson Williams because, again, St. Brown can have a good game, but typically when St. Brown gets there, it's hitting through smaller chunks, and that doesn't correlate as well as Jameson Williams getting there, because if Jameson Williams hits, he goes for some big plays. That's obviously very interesting for the Buffalo side, because it can gain a ton of yards in one play. It can potentially score a touchdown on that play, get Buffalo back onto the field. He actually does too. Like, you don't really think about Jameson Williams as a slot wide receiver, but he still does run 35% of his routes from the slot this season. He does have a higher yards per route run total from the slot than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And his big differentiator has been home games. For whatever reason, it could easily be randomness, but for whatever reason, Jameson Williams has played a million times better at home this season. 6 home games for Jameson Williams, he's averaged 4.3 receptions, 85 yards, and half a touchdown. In the 5 road games, only 2.2 receptions, 40 yards, and 0.2 touchdowns. His best receiving total on the road this year, 76 yards. At home, he's gone higher than 76 yards in 5 of 6 games. Again, could easily be randomness, but there could also be something behind it, something to where they just utilize him more at home. And again, he does correlate just a little bit better with Goff, with the Bills pass catchers. And so I think it makes sense to use him. I also do think it makes sense to adjust his projection higher. I'm not personally doing that, so I don't want to lead you astray. I have not taken higher on his adjusted projection. I have not moved it higher. You can see that I posted it on Twitter. The logic for doing that is basically, well, if he's going to hit for a big play, we want that, right? We would love it if he hit for a 50, 60 yard play and he ends up with 80, 90 yards on the day. And if that happens, it becomes much more likely that Goff and the Bills pieces are hitting. So if you just assume that that happens, you've got a really good chance. Maybe you adjust the projection up to like 69.5 receiving yards. I just didn't feel confident enough that he would get there. And I do think the Bills side can still hit, even if Jameson Williams just has a good game, doesn't necessarily pop off. So I would prefer taking higher on his receiving yardage projection, which is 49.5, and not adjusting it 20 yards higher, just because, again, St. Brown can hit, the running backs can hit. They can do it in so many ways that I don't necessarily think you need to be hitting that higher receiving yardage total for Jameson Williams and bumping it up really far. So again, for the 4, I would do both Josh Allen and Goff are at the exact same passing yards projection. So 254.5 for both of them. Take higher on both of those. Khalil Shakir, 55.5 receiving yards. And then Jameson Williams, higher than 49.5 receiving yards as well. Next up, the section that has had the most success this season, the rapid fire section. I've got 6 more for you in this section. Let's bust through them. First up, you do not have to take them together. I would honestly suggest maybe not taking them together. And if you do, you might as well add Jaden Daniels higher in his passing yardage projection, because if you take 2 pass catchers, you should probably take the receiver as well. And then you should probably throw something on the other side as well. But I would take them individually, Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz. Terry McLaurin, it'll be higher than 66.5 receiving yards. Zach Ertz, higher than 32.5 receiving yards. Noah Brown was really the only pass catcher on this team that was stepping up in any way this season. He's out, could be rest of season, but he's out definitely this week with an injury. Austin Eckler also out. So I would expect, the already very strong target shares of Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz to be even more locked in this weekend. And they're also taking on a Saints team that has really struggled to apply pressure to the quarterback and to tackle. They're generating sacks at the 6th lowest rate in the league. They're allowing the longest average time to throw for quarterbacks. They're allowing by a mile the most yards after the catch per reception over expectation. The Commanders should have really just no problem moving the ball, and they're going to do that through the air with McLaurin and Ertz. I also really like Adam Thielen yet again, higher than 50.5 receiving yards. He's gone higher in all 3 games since returning. Bryce Young has looked like a completely different quarterback recently. I know I've said that a lot, and maybe it seems like I'm overselling this here, but I really don't think I am. I truly don't think we can overstate the difference between Bryce Young, who was literally the worst quarterback in the NFL last season, the worst quarterback I've ever seen to start this season. Then he gets benched. He comes back and you're like, oh boy, look at this upcoming schedule. He's going to get destroyed. Last 3 weeks, Chiefs, Bucks aren't that great of a defense, but Chiefs, Bucks, Eagles. That would be a stretch where you're like, okay, are we going to see Andy Dalton again? He's been playing great. He's looked awesome. And so not a top 5 quarterback or anything, but he's looked so different. I don't think the public is truly caught up to how well Bryce Young is playing. There's nothing about this Cowboys matchup that scares me really in any way. And so yet again, we just keep picking Adam Thielen because Thielen's the wide receiver that Bryce Young trusts. He's playing really well. I just think it makes all the sense in the world to just keep going back to it until they adjust the projection higher. Another pretty easy one is Derrick Henry to score a touchdown. He scored a touchdown in all but 2 games this season. The Ravens are an almost unbelievable 16.5 point road favorite, which means at home they would be favored by nearly 20 points. That's crazy. Giants stink. The Ravens going to have the ball all game. This is the 8th worst run defense in terms of yards after contact per attempt. That is terrible news when you're facing Derrick Henry. He's going to score a touchdown this weekend. Another one I like is Travis Kelce, higher than 55.5 receiving yards. Cleveland is a top 5 matchup for slot wide receivers, and over the last 5 weeks, they're also a top 5 matchup for tight ends overall and a number 2 matchup for inline tight ends. Kelce actually leads Kansas City in slot snaps since Hopkins was traded to them and has a dominant 2.16 yards per route run when lined up in line. So we have what is an elite matchup for Travis Kelce, who's already gone higher than 55.5 receiving yards in 5 of the 7 games since Hopkins was traded. And then finally, Alvin Kamara lower than 70.5 rushing yards. I don't really anticipate the Saints playing all that well this weekend. Odds are they'll be losing for most of this game. 70.5 is just a lofty projection. It's not that he can't get there, but it's pretty high, especially when we consider Kendre Miller is back. He looks pretty good. And you combine that with just the state of the Saints offense. They're missing Carr, Olave, Shaheed, Taysom. They're not making the playoffs. They don't have their starting quarterback. They don't have any of their other good playmakers. They're very unlikely to gain a lead. And they do have to figure out their plan at running back moving forward. Kamara has been amazing this season, but he turns 30 this summer. So while he hasn't seen the cliff yet, the cliff at running back comes very abruptly, and that could come next season. Again, haven't seen it yet. Having one of the better seasons of his career, but it makes all the sense in the world that over these final games, the Saints are at least going to see what they have in Kendre Miller, because they might need to rely on him a lot more next season. And so while I still think Kamara is going to get plenty of touches, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to just run him into the ground in meaningless games when you have another running back on the roster that you haven't been able to evaluate because Dennis Allen absolutely hated him. He put him on IR when he wasn't even hurt, and they didn't have other running backs. Like, he hated Kendre Miller, and so Kendre never got any sort of opportunities. Now, again, Kendre struggled to stay healthy. That was on him. But he was not injured when he was put on IR this last time. Dennis Allen just hated him. So we will see, but I think they're going to start giving more opportunities to him because it doesn't make any sense in the world. Every play that you just run the ball with Kamara is a completely wasted rep where you're not learning anything about the next season and you're not going to make playoffs this season. Still going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen to nearly the rate that people have anticipated thus far and seen thus far this season. I think we're going to slowly see a little bit more shifted over to Kendre Miller. And again, 70.5 is a very high projection, so we're going to take lower on Underdog's projection for that. All right, I've got more picks on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, which again is 100% free. That is weekly rankings, detailed projections. You want to see my exact projection for every player, you can do that. Betting models, betting picks. You can see all these Underdog picks plus a few more. You can see dynasty content, all of it completely free through the Super Bowl. Also, if you follow me on Twitter, I'll tweet out any other picks I make. I don't know. I've told you guys the ones that I'm going to take right now, but I'll tweet out any others that I happen to take. So follow me over there at Nick Zylak FFA. So good luck to everyone this weekend, not only for Underdog picks, but also for your redraft leagues as well and best ball as well. I'll see you all on Monday for the Week 16 waiver wire video.